The NBC Studios in Burbank were alive with anticipation on the evening of March 14, 1973. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson was taping before a live studio audience of 300 people, all of them dressed in their finest, excited to witness television magic. The air conditioning hummed steadily, fighting against the heat of the stage lights that bathed everything in a warm, professional glow. Doc Severinsen and the NBC Orchestra were finishing their opening number, the brass section hitting those final triumphant notes that signaled America's favorite late-night ritual was beginning. Johnny Carson walked onto the stage in his perfectly tailored suit, the trademark smile already in place. The audience erupted. This was peak Carson, 1973, when The Tonight Show wasn't just a television program, but a cultural institution. 11 million people tuned in every night. To be on Carson's show was to matter. To be Carson's friend was to be in the most exclusive club in entertainment. Johnny launched into his monologue with the effortless timing that made him the king of late night. Politics, current events, the absurdities of daily life, all delivered with that particular combination of mischief and intelligence that was pure Carson. The audience laughed on cue, groaned at the bad puns, applauded at the clever observations. This was the routine, the comfort, the nightly appointment that millions of Americans kept before bed. But tonight would be different. Tonight, Johnny Carson had booked his friend Dean Martin as the only guest for the full 90 minutes. No other celebrities, no musical acts, just two men talking. The network executives had questioned the decision. Dean was always entertaining, sure, but could he carry an entire show? Johnny had insisted. "Trust me," he'd said, "this one matters." When Johnny introduced Dean Martin, the audience response was thunderous. Dean walked out looking exactly like Dean Martin should look, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his hair perfect, that easy smile that suggested nothing ever bothered him, nothing ever hurt, nothing ever penetrated the cool exterior. He was the king of cool, after all, the man who made everything look effortless. Dean and Johnny shook hands, and there was genuine warmth there. These weren't just two entertainers playing parts. These were friends, men who'd known each other for over 20 years, who'd navigated the treacherous waters of Hollywood success together, who'd celebrated triumphs and weathered storms side by side. The first 15 minutes went exactly as expected. Johnny asked about Dean's latest album, and Dean told a funny story about a recording session gone wrong. They talked about golf, because both men were obsessed with golf. Dean did his impression of Frank Sinatra critiquing his swing, and the audience roared. Johnny countered with a story about accidentally hitting a ball through a country club window. This was comfortable, familiar, the kind of easy banter that both men could do in their sleep. "You know what I love about doing your show," Dean said, settling back in his chair. "I never have to pretend with you, Johnny." It was a simple statement, delivered casually, but something in Dean's voice caught Johnny's attention. There was a weight to those words that didn't match the lightness of the conversation they'd been having. "Pretend what?" Johnny asked, his comedian's instincts sensing something beneath the surface. Dean smiled, but this time the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Pretend that it's all easy. Pretend that it's all as smooth as it looks from out there." He gestured vaguely toward the audience, toward the cameras, toward the millions watching at home. The studio audience had gone quiet, sensing that something was shifting. This wasn't part of the usual late-night formula. This felt real in a way that television usually wasn't. Johnny leaned forward slightly, his full attention on Dean now. The comedian in him knew when to stop performing and start listening. "Talk to me, Dean." Dean took a breath, looking down at his hand for a moment. When he looked back up, some of the polish had fallen away. "You ever feel lonely, Johnny? I mean really lonely, even when you're surrounded by people?" The question hung in the air. Johnny didn't deflect with a joke, didn't reach for the easy laugh. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, I have." "It's the strangest thing," Dean continued, his voice thoughtful. "I can be on stage in Vegas, 2,000 people laughing at every joke, applauding every song, and inside I feel like I'm completely alone, like I'm performing from behind glass, and nobody can actually reach me. Nobody can actually see me." The vulnerability in Dean's voice was startling. This was Dean Martin, the man who made a career of appearing unflappable, admitting to loneliness on national television. The audience sat transfixed. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was confession. When did that start? Johnny asked gently. I don't know exactly. Dean said, maybe it's always been there, and I just got better at hiding it. Or maybe it's what happens when you spend your whole life giving people what they want instead of being who you are. You ever think about that, Johnny? How much of what we do is performance, and how much is actually us? Johnny nodded slowly. Every night, he admitted. Every single night. I wonder if people like Johnny Carson person, or Johnny Carson the character I play on television. Exactly, Dean said, pointing at Johnny. Exactly that. And the really terrifying part is, after a while, you're not even sure yourself where the character ends and the real person begins. You've been performing so long that you've forgotten how to be anything else. The conversation was deepening in a way that rarely happened on late-night television. Two men, both at the absolute peak of their careers, both beloved by millions, admitting to the fundamental loneliness of their profession. The audience seemed to be holding its collective breath, afraid that any noise might break the spell. You want to know something that almost nobody knows? Dean asked, and there was something vulnerable and almost frightened in his eyes now. Only if you want to tell me, Johnny said, and there was no pressure in his voice, just an invitation. Dean was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with something internal. Finally, he spoke. My son, Dean Paul. Dino, you know him. He's been on the show. Great kid, Johnny said warmly. Really talented. Yeah, he is, Dean agreed, and his voice caught slightly. A few years ago, he joined the Air National Guard, became a pilot. And every time he goes up in one of those planes, every single time, I'm terrified. I'm terrified that I'm going to lose him. The fear in Dean's voice was raw and unguarded. My brother was in the Air Force, got killed in training. My mother never recovered from that. Never. And now my son is up there flying jets. And all I can think about is, what if something happens? What if I lose him too? Johnny's expression was pained. He understood what Dean was sharing, the way old traumas echo forward, the way loss teaches you to fear new losses. Dean, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about your brother. Most people don't, Dean said. It was during World War II. I don't talk about it much. But it changed everything for my family. My mother, she was never the same. And I see that same fear in myself now with Dino, and I hate it. I hate being afraid all the time. The studio was silent except for the hum of the lights and the faint sound of the air conditioning. 300 people were watching two men be completely, devastatingly honest with each other. There's something else, Dean said, and now his voice was barely above a whisper. Something I've never told anyone outside of a very small circle. Johnny waited, giving Dean the space to continue or not continue as he chose. About 2 years ago, Dean began, and he had to stop and collect himself. About 2 years ago, I went through something. A dark period. The darkest I've ever been through. Everything just felt pointless. The shows, the records, the movies, all of it just felt like this endless hamster wheel of performing and smiling and pretending everything was great when inside I felt hollow. Dean's hands were trembling slightly. I'd wake up in the morning, and the first thought I had was, I have to get through another day of being Dean Martin. Not being me, being Dean Martin, the character, the image. And I started to think, what's the point? Why am I doing this? Who am I even doing it for? Johnny's eyes were glistening now. He'd never seen Dean like this, never heard him speak with this kind of raw desperation. I started drinking more, Dean admitted. I know everyone thinks I'm drunk on stage as part of the act, and mostly it is an act. But during that period, it wasn't an act. I was actually drinking, trying to numb everything, try to make it all stop hurting so much. And I started thinking about what would happen if I just stopped, if I just walked away from everything, or worse. The implications of that, or worse, settled over the studio like a heavy blanket. Dean Martin, one of the most successful entertainers in the world, was admitting that he contemplated ending it all. Dean, Johnny said, and his voice was thick with emotion. Wait, Dean said, holding up a hand. Let me finish this, because this is why I wanted to be here tonight. This is what I need to tell you. Johnny nodded, waiting. One night during that period, Dean continued, I couldn't sleep. It was maybe 2, 3 in the morning, and I was in my house alone, thinking thoughts I shouldn't have been thinking. And I turned on the television just for noise, just for something to distract me from my own head. And your show was on. A rerun from earlier that night. Dean looked directly at Johnny now. You were doing your monologue and you told a story. I don't even think you remember it. It wasn't a big story. Wasn't one of your famous bits. You were talking about getting a letter from a viewer, someone who was going through a hard time, and they told you that watching your show every night was the one thing that made them feel less alone. And you said something that stopped me cold. What did I say? Johnny asked quietly. You said, Dean's voice was shaking now. Sometimes we forget that words matter, that laughter matters. That showing up and try and bring a little light into someone's living room every night isn't just entertainment. It's connection. And maybe, just maybe, when someone out there is feeling like they're the only person struggling, hearing another human voice reminding them that tomorrow might be better, that's worth something. That matters. Tears were streaming down Dean's face now, and he didn't try to hide them. And then you said, if you're out there watching this and you're having a hard time, please hold on. Please stay. The world needs you, even if you don't believe that right now. Johnny's hand had moved to cover his mouth, his own eyes filling with tears. Johnny, Dean said, his voice breaking, I was that person. I was the person you were talking to. And I heard you in that moment at 3 in the morning, feeling like I was drowning. I heard you, and something in the way you said it, something in your voice made me believe it, made me think, maybe I can hold on one more day. Maybe I can make it through one more night. The tears were flowing freely down Johnny's face now. His shoulders were shaking. He'd removed his glasses and was wiping his eyes, not even attempting to maintain composed television host persona. You saved my life, Johnny, Dean said simply. With words you spoke into a camera, not even knowing I was listening. You saved my life. And I wanted to tell you that for 2 years, but I could never find the right moment. And then I thought, maybe there is no right moment. Maybe I just need to say it. So I called your producer and asked if I could come on and talk to you, really talk to you, and tell you what you did for me. The studio audience was openly crying now. Grown men and women. Tears streaming down their faces, watching two legends be completely vulnerably human. Johnny stood up from his desk and walked around to where Dean was sitting. Dean stood too, and the two men embraced. Not a show business hug, not a performance with cameras, but a real embrace between two friends, two men who just shared something profound and unrepeatable. Dean, Johnny managed to say, his voice choked with emotion. I had no idea. I had no idea those words would reach you. I had no idea you were struggling. That's the thing, Dean said, still holding on to Johnny. You need to know. That's what made it real. You weren't performing compassion. You were just being genuinely kind to someone you'd never meet, and it happened to be exactly what I needed to hear in exactly the moment I needed to hear it. They separated, both men wiping their eyes, both trying to collect themselves. The audience was applauding now, but it wasn't the enthusiastic applause of entertainment. It was a reverent applause of people who just witnessed something sacred. Johnny walked back behind his desk, not because he was ready to resume the show, but because he needed something solid to hold on to. I don't even know what to say, he admitted. I feel like I should say something profound, but all I can think is, thank God. Thank God you heard that. Thank God you stayed. Me too, Dean said, managing a small smile. Me too, Johnny. There was a long silence, not awkward but contemplative. Finally, Johnny spoke. You know, we do this job, this ridiculous job of making people laugh and telling jokes and interviewing celebrities, and most of the time I think of it as just entertainment, just a way to help people unwind before bed. But what you just told me, Dean, what you just shared, it reminds me that sometimes we forget the power of this. He gestured at the cameras, at the studio, at the apparatus of television. We forget that there are real people out there, living real lives, going through real struggles. And sometimes a moment of connection, even a moment of connection through a television screen, can matter more than we ever imagine. Dean nodded. That's exactly it. That's exactly what I wanted you to know. Can I ask you something? Johnny said, anything. Are you okay now? I mean, really okay? Dean considered the question seriously. I'm better, he said honestly. Some days are harder than others. I still struggle with the loneliness sometimes, with the fear about my son, with wondering who I really am underneath all the performance. But I'm here. I'm still here. And that's because of you, Johnny. That's because on one night, you reminded me that staying matters, that tomorrow might be better. And you were right. Tomorrow was better. Not perfect, not easy, but better. Johnny's smile was watery, but genuine. I'm so glad, Dean. I'm so glad you're still here. Me too, Dean said. And Johnny, I want you to know something else. What you do here, every night, it matters more than you probably realize. You're not just entertaining people. You're keeping people company. You're reminding them that they're not alone. That's not a small thing. That's everything. The weight of that statement settled over the studio. Johnny Carson, the man who made America laugh every night, was being told by one of his closest friends that his work had saved a life. Not through anything spectacular or dramatic, just through showing up and being genuinely kind. I think about that viewer who wrote to you sometimes. Dean continued, the one you mentioned in that monologue. I wonder if they're still out there, if they made it through whatever they were going through. I hope they did. I hope they heard your words the same way I did. I hope so too, Johnny said quietly. They talked for another 30 minutes. The conversation lighter now, but still maintaining that thread of genuine connection they'd established. Dean told stories about his children, about finding joy in the small moments, about learning to be present rather than always performing. Johnny shared his own struggles with balancing the public persona and the private person, with maintaining relationships in an industry that demanded so much of your time and energy. As the show wound down, Johnny addressed the audience directly. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here tonight for this. I know this wasn't your typical Tonight Show episode, but sometimes television can be more than just entertainment. Sometimes it can be a space for real conversation, real emotion, real truth. And Dean, thank you for trusting me enough to share what you shared. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being here. The audience stood and applauded, and this time the applause went on, a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Dean and Johnny stood together, neither performing now, just being present in the moment. After the show wrapped, after the audience had filed out and the crew had started breaking down the set, Johnny and Dean sat in Johnny's dressing room, both exhausted from the emotional weight of what they just shared with millions of viewers. Are you okay? Johnny asked. I mean, with having told all of that on television? Dean thought about it. Yeah, he said finally. Yeah, I am. I think I needed to say it. And more than that, I think maybe someone else needs to hear it. Maybe there's someone out there right now watching this, going through their own dark time, and maybe hearing that someone like me struggled too, that even people who seem to have it all together are sometimes barely holding on. Maybe that helps them feel less alone. Johnny nodded. I never thought of it that way. I never thought that what I do could actually matter like that. Everything matters, Dean said. Every word, every moment of kindness, every time you choose to be genuine instead of just performing. It all matters, Johnny. And tonight proved that. The episode aired 3 nights later, and the response was overwhelming. NBC's switchboards were flooded with calls. Letters poured in by the thousands. People sharing their own stories of struggle, of finding hope in unexpected places, of the power of a kind word spoken at exactly the right moment. Mental health advocates praised the episode for its honest discussion of depression and suicidal ideation. Entertainment critics called it one of the most important moments in television history. But more importantly, people who were struggling, people who were contemplating giving up, people who felt alone in their pain, they watched and they heard Dean Martin say, I was there too and I made it through, and they stayed. Dean Martin continued performing for another 2 decades. He watched his son, Dean Paul, successfully complete his military service, though tragically, Dino would die in a plane crash in 1987, the very fear Dean had articulated coming devastatingly true. Johnny Carson continued hosting The Tonight Show, until 1992, becoming the gold standard against which all late-night hosts will be measured. But both men always pointed to that night in March 1973 as one of the most important of their careers. Not because it was funny, not because it was entertaining in the traditional sense, but because it was real. Because in a medium built on performance and artifice, they created a moment of genuine human connection. Years later, in one of Johnny Carson's final interviews before his retirement, he was asked about his most memorable show. He didn't talk about the biggest celebrities or the funniest moments or the highest ratings. He talked about the night Dean Martin told him that words had saved a life. That night taught me something I've forgotten, Johnny said. It taught me that we're not just here to distract people from their lives for an hour. We're here to remind them that their lives matter, that they matter. And sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply be kind, be genuine, and show up even when we don't know who's watching or who might need to hear exactly what we have to say. The legacy of that episode endures. In a world where television has become increasingly fragmented, where genuine emotion is often viewed with suspicion, where vulnerability is seen as weakness, that night stands as a reminder of what the medium can be at its best. A space for truth, a space for connection, a space where one person's honesty can become another person's lifeline. Dean Martin saved himself by staying, and Johnny Carson saved Dean by speaking words of compassion into the void, never knowing who might be listening. But in the end, they saved each other. Dean reminded Johnny that his work mattered in ways he'd never imagined. And Johnny reminded Dean that he was worth saving, that his life had value beyond his ability to entertain. That's the real story of the night Johnny Carson cried. Not that a talk show host got emotional on television, but that two friends showed America what brotherhood looks like, what vulnerability looks like, what it means to truly see another person and be seen in return. March 14th, 1973. The night television stopped being just entertainment and became something more. The night Dean Martin revealed how words save a life. And Johnny Carson discovered that compassion ripples out in ways we never expect. The night that reminded us all that behind every performance, there's a human being. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let that human being be seen. That's a moment worth remembering.